Hello, this is AnlineOffline. Welcome to COD Mobile 102, a casual's guide. For today's video, we'll be covering the Arctic 50. Unlocked at level 32, the Arctic 50 is a semi-automatic anti-material rifle from COD Online, available since launch. It made its Call of Duty debut in Modern Warfare 3, properly named as the AS-50. It last returned in Black Ops 4's post-launch as the futuristic tube-fed Javelina AA-50. When you hear Accuracy International, you probably think of their Arctic Warfare bolt actions. The AS-50 is their first and only semi-auto design. Given its muzzle brake, free-floating barrel, and direct impingement system, the recoil is less than that of the AW-50. It was intended to compete with the Barrett M82 for the US Navy SEALs and British Armed Forces, but it never took off. Back to COD Mobile. Base damage per shot is high, and has the same one-shot areas as the base Locust. It will normally one-shot anywhere from the ribs and up at any range. However, that won't be the case for anyone using Serpentine, TAC-5, or Kinetic Armor. The fire rate is 120 rounds per minute. Faster than bolt actions, but this is slower than all other semi-autos except for the Rytec with either explosive or thermite rounds. The penetration is perfectly average for its class, but you need FMJ to one-shot like normal through thin cover in its first range. In terms of mobility, it's tied with the Rytec for the slowest walking speed and second in sprinting and strafing. The base ADS and sprint out times are average for a sniper. At best, the Arctic is relative to the ZRG, Locust, and Koshka. Compared to other snipers, the raise time is slightly faster than average, but the drop time is tied for the slowest. The base mag size at 7 rounds and can be extended to 10 and 12, or reduced to 5 with stopping power. Reload times are normal among the original snipers. When empty, you can reload cancel before you fully insert the mag. With spare rounds, you can cancel as you're fully inserting the mag. Unlike most weapons, the add time is faster when empty than when not. With stopping power, it will now one-shot to the stomach in its first range, except through cover. Beyond that, it will one-shot to the ribs and up, like in base, even through thick cover. However, the fire rate is reduced to 100 rounds per minute. Your base mag size is reduced by 2, and there's more recoil. Luckily, it no longer harms ADS time. As for accuracy, the Arctic has very similar idle sway to that of the NA-45 and SKS. Thus, of all the idle sways I've covered so far, the only ones more steady are the Tundra, HDR, Rytec, and ZRG. The default scope and breath hold times are run-of-the-mill for a sniper. The recoil kicks like a mule, especially with stopping power, and unlike most bolt actions, semi-autos have to deal with it. Yes, you could stack recoil attachments to eliminate it, but those cripple ADS time. The fire spread is abysmal, and tied for second worst in its class along with the Rytec, ZRG, SVD, and Koshka. The only other sniper that's worse at no-scoping is the 3-line. As expected of a sniper, the Flinch is high compared to other weapons, but average for its class. Its max flinch with a speed build is the 4th worst in the game. Interestingly, with 3 attachments, the Arctic is one of the few guns in this game that could achieve 0 flinch, like the MG42 and SKS. However, such a build is impractical even for campers on most maps. So what was the Arctic 50 like in the main games? In its first appearance, the AS-50 and Barrett 50 cal had the highest damage of any weapon in the game. Unlike other snipers, the AS was unique for having less zoom on its default scope. However, if you could handle idle sway, then it would be better to use the Barrett for its faster fire rate and larger magazine. Even though we take after COD Online, there's not much information on it, so we'll have to move on to Black Ops 4. The Javelina AA-50 wasn't just one of the strongest DLC weapons ever added. It wasn't just one of the best semi-autos ever. It was also pay to win. It had the same one-shot area as the Paladin in base, but had quadruple the fire rate, manageable recoil, more rounds per mag, and had aim assist when other snipers didn't. Even after the removal of aim assist and nerf to its high caliber 2 damage, it remained arguably the best sniper. There were some downsides. If you weren't using a speed loader, then you had to reload each round individually. That and it didn't have quick draw, so its only competition was with the Toshka and Locust. In the early days of COD Mobile, you could make the case that the Arctic 50 was arguably the best sniper besides the VLQ. The Outlaw was not reliable. The Locust was locked behind microtransactions at first. The Arctic was a free, steadier version with a faster fire rate. Between it, the EBR, and the XPR, the Arctic was the least awkward semi-auto for beginner thumb players. So most sat in the back of the map with a tac scope. It took a while for people to catch on after Gunsmiths was added, but the Arctic peaked in popularity because of its unique version of stopping power that could one-shot anywhere in the body, even through cover. This was made more frustrating when going up against someone who knew how to blank scope, thus invalidating any penalties to ADS time or recoil, and it originally didn't have a fire rate penalty. First nerf to stopping power wasn't enough. The second nerf finally ended its reign. Never again could it one-shot to the legs. And then the other snipers were nerfed. SMGs were allowed faster movement and faster time to kills in close quarters to keep Quickscopers in check. However, the base Arctic remained strong as a spam version of the Locust. There was a bug that allowed thumb players to achieve a faster fire rate than what was normally possible. This was patched in anticipation for 2019's Rytec, a newer sniper that could one-shot to the stomach and base with ridiculous swap times. And with a mag attachment, it could one-shot anywhere in the body, but with no controversy. For the second anniversary, snipers received a buff to their Flinch, and the Iron Lungs perk was added. In 2022, Disable 2 was removed from ARs and given to snipers and marksmen instead. This wasn't useful for weapons expected to one-shot in multiplayer. Halfway through that year, the Arctic got faster swap times along with nearly every other gun. A couple seasons later, another full-body one-shot was added, was problematic, and later nerfed. By the start of 2023, the devs realized that they may have nerfed stopping power too hard. Sometime between this point and back then, they scaled back the penalty to recoil, ADS time, and fire rate. In Season 1, the penalty to ADS time was again scaled back, and the new damage allowed for FMJ to one-shot through thick cover at any range as if it wasn't there. Bullet impact was added, and this was not good for high recoil semi-autos that relied on hard scoping. At the end of 2023, the devs decided to reverse their decision on stopping power. In exchange for even faster handling, they nerfed the stomach multiplier and removed the boost to damage and range, thus giving it the damage drop-off that we know today. The Arctic would not be mentioned again in a patch note for another 2 years. Fast forward to 2025 and wildcards were added. Greed gave snipers access to Iron Lungs as a second red perk, and Overkill allowed for a second primary. By then, there was very little reason to use the Arctic over other semi-autos. Starting 2026, the Arctic got a buff to its ADS time. For years, slower ADS was the defining drawback of stopping power, and that was no more. As of most recently, Perk Booster was added as a wildcard, so you can earn extra perks like Iron Lungs or Toughness to compensate for any weaknesses. So, what do I think about the Arctic 50 after all these years? Well, it's been a long time since I have thought about it. I wouldn't say that it's a bad gun. There are worse snipers, but it's not something I would use if I were playing seriously. Either you use stopping power and sometimes quickscope, or you don't and play whack-a-mole at mid-range. It doesn't help that the recoil and flinch are high. I guess it could ADS faster than the nerfed Tundra, but bolt actions are easier to use than semi-autos. So, how does the Arctic fare with its peers? If we're judging just stopping power, then it's no surprise that its closest comparison is with the base Rytec. They have the same one-shot areas, range, and movement speeds. The base Rytec has a steadier idle sway, less flinch, a much faster fire rate, an extra round in the mag, and can swap to a secondary very quickly. The Arctic has a much faster ADS, sprint, empty reload, no delay in recentering its recoil, and the multipliers for one-shot wall bangs through thick cover with FMJ. I don't know if I would strongly favor one over the other. I think I might lean slightly towards the Rytec for its potential to anchor and control spawns. But if I were to quickscope, I'd prefer the Optic. But what about no stopping power? For that, we address our other Barrett. It's been 4 years since my video on the XPR, and I'd say that the gun still holds up nicely. Sure, it doesn't have the range, raw damage for penetration, and it's limited to 8 rounds with stopping power. But if you're comfortable with 4-finger claw, then the XPR is a far more nimble and forgiving weapon. So what can we suggest to make the Optic cool again? One of the biggest complaints is the base weapon is a hitmarker machine in a fast-paced meta. But what if they were to buff its damage so that you could one-shot to the stomach within a modest range? Thus, you don't have to use stopping power if you want to quickscope. And if you do, you can one-shot to the stomach at any range like before 2024. Speaking of stopping power, everyone remembers how much of a menace it was in its prime. And they've added other snipers since then that could one-shot to the legs without too many complaints. That begs the question, should they bring it back for the Optic? I understand what they were doing, watering it down to make it more palatable to the masses. But I now believe it's time to reverse course. If they use the Optic as a template, it's only fair that they bring back its harsher penalties and make blank scoping a non-issue. In conjunction to my previous suggestion, I propose full body one-shots in shotgun range and wall bangs like in 2023. Stopping power isn't the only attachment that should be buffed, but you could say the same for other snipers in general. For most, it's as simple as building for ADS time. The potential for a Javelina, zero recoil, or Flinch build is there. Perhaps the BR players might appreciate it, or DMZ whenever it enters rotation. One way to make old guns feel new again is to give them worthwhile signature attachments. I believe infrared optics should be added to all weapons, but the Optic should specifically have its mythic thermal scope from BR, and see-through smoke, flash drones, and storm balls. It's not fair that the only other gun with such an optic is the Type 19, but only in DMZ. And lastly, it would be nice to have the original AS50 and Javelina models as blueprints. But hey, that's just my opinion. This has been a Casual's quick guide. Feel free to suggest what weapons you want to see covered next. My name is On, and I'm off.